I ended up with Epstein's Black Book. There was scores of victims. He would get girls and pay them like $200 to get other girls. The mainstream media has done such a disservice to these girls. It has sanitized that trafficking network. Some of these guys like to beat up little boys or little girls. Some of these guys are unbelievably powerful. You would know their names. One of them is a former prime minister. One of the girls, she was molested by Alan Dershowitz. The girl that has come forward, she had been molested by both Bill Richardson and Bruce King, and both of them had been former governors. Some people very high up were doing favors for Jeffrey Epstein. If you were part of that network, you'd get anything you wanted. And I developed an expertise in that area of child trafficking. So I was reading about Epstein, and I read that there were other girls that knew about Epstein or that came forward about Epstein, but he wasn't that grand jury hadn't indicted him on a single count of child molestation. And that's exactly what happened in the Franklin scandal. Nobody was indicted for child molestation, even though there were a bunch of kids. I had a list of 60 kids that had been involved in the Franklin scandal. So the exact same thing was happening with Epstein. And then so I went down there in 2012 and I started investigating, and I ended up with Epstein's Black Book. And
where did you start your investigation?
I started calling people that were involved. I called Michael Ryder. He was the police chief, the former Palm Beach Police Department police chief. I called people that had covered it in the newspapers.
Was he part of the cover-up?
Michael Ryder? No, he was part of it getting exposed.
Okay.
Yeah, he was like Mr. Stand-Up guy and all this. I mean, if it hadn't been for him, we wouldn't be here talking. Epstein would be rolling right now and trafficking girls. I'm pretty convinced. But he made such a stink about it that he made sure that the feds got involved. So then the feds had to cover it up. But when I got Epstein's Black Book, there was scores of victims.
Well, let's talk about the journey to get his Black Book. So how did it happen? I mean, I don't think you just show up and say, hey, can I take a look at that? How did you get access to that?
You cultivate relationships. Like with the Franklin scandal, I actually got some people in federal law enforcement to give me information.
Okay.
It took me some time. But once they see that your aim is true, and they don't think that you're going to snitch on them for helping you, that you're stand-up, then they'll help you. And someone took that chance with me and gave me the Black Book. And then I was down in Florida, and then I started calling. I wanted to get victims first. I mean, that was my first concern, was because there was like long lists of victims. And so I started calling these victims, and then they started telling me about being flown to different places into his island with other girls.
Well, let's get a little more in depth. So how many victims did you talk to?
At that point, I talked to, I believe, 4.
How were they soliciting them? How did the approach happen?
With Epstein just he would get girls and pay them like $200 to get other girls. So, and that's exactly how it works with Franklin, where if you bring someone in, they'll pay you money.
Okay.
So, and he just had this huge machine that was funneling girls. I mean, he had all these girls and procurers looking for other girls.
How young did the girls go?
Okay, so the mainstream media has said 14, but I don't think that that's true.
That's inaccurate.
We're talking as young as 11 or 12.
11 or 12?
Yes. And actually, I believe that one of the victims that litigated against Epstein was 13 at the time. So the mainstream media has done such a disservice to these girls because it has sanitized that trafficking network. I mean, those girls were younger than 14, definitely. And the viciousness that some of them were subjected to. I mean, some of these, and I saw this in the Franklin scandal, some of these guys like to beat up these little boys or little girls. I mean, and some of these guys are unbelievably powerful. You would know their names. And that's what they like to do. That's how they get off.
Do you know the names?
Some of them, yeah.
Are they in the black book?
Yes.
Who are they?
Yes. One of them is a former prime minister. And he, according to one victim I talked to, liked to beat up victims.
Why don't you want to say the name? I'm just curious.
I think that just the information that I've given you is enough for someone to basically determine who he is.
Where could they find the names?
Okay, so Gawker published the Black Book. It's online. If you Google Nick Bryant Gawker Black Book, it'll be there.
It's out there.
And actually, this gentleman is circled. Alfredo Rodriguez was the house manager.
Well, hold on. Before we get into all that, where were they flying these girls? Who would they fly with?
These girls were flown everywhere, and they were flown with politicians.
How many at a time?
It all depends because we don't really know. I mean, we've got passenger manifests, but it's hard to know how honest. But there was definitely, like Alan Dershowitz, he said that he'd never flown with Jeffrey Epstein. And in the article that I wrote for Gawker, he's on a passenger manifest with Tatiana and Claire, and Alan Dershowitz said, "I've never molested any of these girls." Blah 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 blah. And then he's nailed, though.
Who is that? I don't know who.
Alan Dershowitz is a famous attorney.
Okay.
That was part of the Jeffrey Epstein network, and he got nailed. I mean, he said that he only flew with. Actually, he's one of the most famous attorneys in the world. There's been, I think it was Reverse La Fortune about Klaus von Bülow, who he was convicted or arraigned for killing his very wealthy wife, and Alan Dershowitz represented him. So, and he is was a leading scholar at Harvard, legal scholar at Harvard. And he was a good friend of Jeffrey Epstein's. And one of the girls that has come forward and said that she was molested by Alan Dershowitz. Another girl has said that she wasn't a minor, but she had been pandered to Alan Dershowitz. And then another woman has said, another Epstein victim has said that Epstein had a house in New York and that there would be quote unquote model auditions in the second floor. And there would be young girls there. And Alan Dershowitz went right up the stairs to where the young models were being auditioned.
So they would fly these young girls, 11 to, let's just say 11 on up.
I mean, some of them were 18, 19, 20, 21.
Okay.
I mean, the thing is, Epstein liked girls that were like 13 or 14. But if you wanted someone that was younger, I mean, Epstein is a psychopath. Mm-hmm. If you wanted someone that was younger, he didn't have any problem with that. If you wanted someone that was older, he didn't have a problem with that either. I mean, he had the type of girls that he liked. But if you were part of that network, you'd get anything you wanted.
So where all would they fly him to? Obviously his island. Where else?
Some were flown to Los Angeles. I've got a bunch of passenger manifests too.
Did he just have houses everywhere?
He had houses. He had a house in Palm Beach. He had a house in New York City. He had the island. And then he had a place a huge place in New Mexico. And there is a girl that has come forward in a deposition, and she said that she had been molested by both Bill Richardson and Bruce King, and both of them had been former governors of New Mexico. And actually, Bill Richardson was a Democratic high flyer. He was Bill Clinton's energy czar. And what's really interesting is Epstein had to register as a sex offender everywhere except New Mexico. So obviously, some people very high up in the New Mexico political machinery were doing favors for Jeffrey Epstein. And according to one of the victims, she was molested by two former governors of New Mexico.